I like
Yeah.
that. I like
And
that
I
very
have
much.
a similar story here. My mom is a famous African American artist. Oh, but she's also a child of the Great Depression. And in her childhood during 1920s, 1930s, she was evicted. Her family's uh, furniture was put out on the street. Okay. And so she, kept she decided that even though she was very creative, she became a teacher and then taught for a long time. But somewhere in her midlife, she said, I got to start painting. And so she started really painting and this stuff to really do this. Now I'm growing up, but as an African American person, she said, you can always hunt, son, you can always do that on the side.
Mm.
You could, I know you're really creative, but you need a real job.
Yeah, you
And
got the
so
message.
so anyway, what I had to do is I had to sublimate that drive. I'm looking at some pottery in, when I went to UC Santa Barbara, my first year, I fell in love with sculpture and pottery. And then I got a chance when I went to Berkeley to study under Peter Volkus, one of the
Mm,
best
great,
ceramicists.
great, great
Yeah.
ceramicist.
And but anyway, so 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 the resolution that I made was, okay, I'm creative, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint with technology. My dog is giving me grief here. Hold on a second.
We'll deal with pets on another.
I assume that that'll get edited out.
He'll win with that. And he's a sweet boy, but he is being bad right now. And I've been teasing with too many treats, so that's what he's doing right now. Come here, stop.
So you
Yeah.
you found art because art found you, but excuse
Yeah, and
the
so what I
nickname
tried to do
art
is I said,
too.
okay, let me be creative in business. Let me try to create something new. And I was raised, my parents were the new Negroes. They left the ghetto in Baltimore and settled in San Jose, and which was become Silicon Valley later on, and always were front runners in everything that they did in the NAACP, and the first black teacher and the first black physician, and in San Jose and all that. And I was a child of change, and I was smitten by TV. And I saw political change and cultural change, in music and in TV, and that transformed me. I said, "Oh, that's something that's always part of my DNA now, so I can do this." I started teaching political science and ethnic studies. And then in the middle of that, I learned there was a TV and a radio station. So I started producing that and developing community using media. And that got me into being a broadcast system sales engineer. So I sold systems to schools. And so what I'm saying is, it seems like in all of us is some kind of a calling. Okay. And this kind of relates to your book, Rick, that one of the first things about this change is deep from within, there's a call. We
Yeah,
don't quite know what it is, but we know we're called by it.
I think you're
Okay.
right about that. You can't answer the call unless you hear it, unless you're able to listen for it. And
Yes.
the question, and I find something very interesting about all three of us on this call today, and that is that we've all, in a sense, improvised about different things in our life. We've picked up new things that we weren't trained for. I wrote a textbook in gerontology, now in 10 editions. I never took a course in gerontology in my life. The same thing in bioethics. I never had any background in it, but I wrote the first book on bioethics. You went into technology, art, and into entrepreneurship, but that wasn't your background. And
No.
and the same with you, Richard. You didn't study these things at Harvard. You improvised and learned them as you went along.
Yeah, well, what strikes me about what the two of you have just said is that all three of us have had multiple careers, in doing very different things. You know, we haven't worked for the same organization for
Correct.
25 years. But the thing that strikes me in common is that we've all, in all through our lives and continuing today, have been seeking meaning in what we do.
Right.
Yes. So maybe
Yeah.
that's a definition of positive aging and
Yes.
retirement as
Yeah.
having going with the meaning and not with what we were told to do or expected to do or et cetera. What do
Well,
you
the
think?
interesting thing is that, and why I think you're onto something, Art, is that I think traditionally retirement is thought of stopping
Yes.
what you've been
Right.
doing, your career, and then you're in a different phase. And what I hear all three of us saying is we see it very much as a continuity.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Continuity. So when you speak about unretirement, Art, and I can understand why you want to use that phrase, because when people hear the word retirement, they have a conventional idea in mind. So if I say to Richard Adler, Richard, are you retired? He says, well, gee, I'll have to think about that, right? But I could have said the same thing. I'm not
Yeah.
sure the answer to that question because I don't know what it means.
Well, there's another piece to this that I think. Hold on a second. My dog just clicked me off. Hold on a second. You're still there.
We hear
Hold on.
you.
By the
You
way,
can you
that is
still?
an example of the life that we're living. Something happens to us completely unanticipated.
Yeah.
The dog just clicked me off.
And here's the person who's messing with me right now. Who's this is Luca here. So Luca is, you know, my puppy trainee here. But what I was going to say is, when I look at your book, and I've just met you, Richard, I think that our calling has to do with the evolution of the history of consciousness itself. That consciousness continues to evolve in the planet, and it's taken different forms. The whole thing of the consciousness movement in the early 60s and people experimenting with psychedelics and then this counterfeit infinity, this whole thing, which I really enjoy. I could relate to that, man. And I see, and you, Richard, taken up in. Did you ever plan that you were going to help seniors in technology when you started your life?
No, but I have been doing it for the last 35 years.
Yeah. And why did you discover
Why did you do it?
why did you do it? Yeah, what brought you to do this?
Well, so I was working as a high-tech consultant back in the 1980s. And I was looking at emerging technologies. I was doing that in a very systematic and serious way. I was working for large corporate clients, and it was a very exciting place to be. It's a small think tank based in Palo Alto. And then I got interested in what I called underserved populations, which were things like rural residents and the elderly and the poor who were not part of the digital revolution. They were being left out. And then one day, a young woman showed up in my office named Mary Furlong, who had the zany idea that older people really were interested in computers, and she wanted to promote that. And I just was intrigued by that idea. So I started helping her out first as a consultant. I wrote a business plan for her and did some planning. And then she ended up getting a substantial amount of foundation funding and wanted to start an organization. And I was the first full-time hire. And so in 1990, the way I described it is I went off and joined the Magical Mystery Tour.
Yes.
Something I
Yes.
never had expected. Started joining a little, tiny nonprofit startup, but it turned out we caught a wave. We were there just at the right moment.
But it happened by accident.
Happened by accident. But I will tell you, all the good things in my life have happened by accident.
Yeah. I second the motion. I'm telling you, I mean, just all of those things, the crisis that I had when I was teaching ethnic studies is I couldn't make a living. Okay. Teaching in 2 departments. I would had to work at 3 different campuses with no benefits at all. Okay. With that. But at the same time, my dear friend, my lifelong friend, came up to me, who was the chair then, and said, "Johnson, we got this TV station, when we got this PBS radio station, How about us creating a whole new experience project? My, oh my, the conversation deepens. So stay tuned for part 3.